delighted to share with you a dear friend that I have known for 25 years. Tom McCabe and I met in 1997 when I was in my late 20s and he was in his early 30s. I was the director of the Marriage and Family Life Office in the Archdiocese of Denver, Colorado, and Tom had the office right next to me as, what was your official title, Tom? You were director of...
I was Youth, Young Adult, and Campus Ministry.
Youth, Young Adult, and Campus Ministry. And I knew you and I were going to be fast friends when you played the best practical joke on me on my starting day in the Archdiocese of Denver in 1997. You had me so good or so bad, I don't know which way to describe it, but share with our viewers a little bit. I've never shared this publicly, so this is the first time your stunt is going to be known by a wider audience. Tell us what happened.
Boy, I don't know if I want to tell this. They're gonna think the worst of me. This isn't typically what you do to win friends and influence people. Correct. So, Christopher, we know the story, right? You and I had met prior to you coming on full time,
right?
Because you had come out to interview, and then I heard you took the job, and you came out, and you were looking for a house. Well, the diocese had hired your secretary. I think it was Angela, if I recall.
Right. Yeah.
Ahead of time, but she and I became friends, and she said, we both thought, yeah, this guy's cool. I'm going to really like this guy. We're going to fit in together. And she said we should play a prank on him. And she goes,
it was Angela's idea?
I think she had said something to me, and so then my creativity went.
I thought this was your idea. This was Angela Dancho's idea, my secretary.
I don't want to pose that to her, but it could have been me. But whatever it was, there was some conversation.
But you were the mastermind behind it. You coordinated the prank.
I'm sorry to say, yes, I was. So basically, you're right, Christopher. We planned this elaborate prank. Your first day on the job. To this day, I still can't believe we actually did this to you. But so I set up a variety of people who had these outlandish stories that were fabricated stories, but they were going to call you while you're sitting down at your desk on the first morning and just ask for your expert advice, your help with these situations.
So I'm getting these crazy calls from people. Like, I remember one situation was this woman said she was engaged to a Buddhist, and would it be okay if she wanted to get married in the church, but she's marrying this Buddhist? Is it okay if we put a Buddha on the altar? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the first phone call I get as director of the Marriage and Family Life Office. And then
you're right. It was two reporters from the Denver Catholic Register that I recruited them, and they were on the call together. And but first they asked you, if you recall, could we go get married at the Buddhist temple? Because we just like the ambiance. We like the ambiance of it all, and it just looks really fun. That's right. Sure, have the priest go over there and celebrate mass, and you're like, no, you really can't do that. And well, can we bring a big Buddha and set him on the altar?
And then you disguised your voice. We won't get into that, how you disguised your voice, but you disguised your voice as this distraught father whose daughter was going to die in mortal sin because she was living with a man that she wasn't married to, and you're asking for my advice, and I'm pouring my heart out to you. Like, I'm praying with you on the phone because I think you're in total distress. And then you and all these people who had played this prank on me, it's probably 3 or 4 different phone calls. And I'm coming out of my office into the hall. I'm saying to you and other people, you would not believe the phone calls I'm getting on the very first day of work. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if it's this bad within the first 3 hours of my first day on the job, what's it going to be like, day to day? And then you and everybody took me out to lunch that day, and you were welcoming me, and you raised a glass, and then you gave me a toast in the voice from the distraught father on the phone. And my face just, like, it was I couldn't believe my ears that you that you were that voice. It was one of the most welcoming things you could have done for me on the first day of my job, having moved from the East Coast out to Colorado and not knowing what I was going to face. I felt dearly loved, and I knew from that day on you and I were going to be very good friends. And we've been colleagues in ministry. We've done lots of projects and ministry adventures together over the years. You ended up moving to Georgia. I ended up moving back to Pennsylvania. But we've remained in touch over the years. And what I really am excited to share with our viewers today is the work that you're doing now with people around forgiveness. And you have this retreat that you offer called Freedom Through Forgiveness that I really am excited for our viewers at our Theology of the Body Institute channel to learn more about. But share first with our viewers, Tom, your experience, your encounter with John Paul II's Theology of the Body, its impact on you, and also how it plays a role in what you do now with this forgiveness ministry.
Well, absolutely, Christopher, and thank you for being a friend to me still. After that terrible prank, it blows me away that it actually deepened a friendship. So at any rate, in the early 90s, I was studying theology, doing a master's degree in theology at Franciscan University of Steubenville. And in various courses, the professors were bringing up different aspects of the theology of the body. But even then, what do they mean by theology of the body? And it was spattered in, in various courses. So I began to be intrigued by it. I took a course on marriage and family, and we were looking at it through a variety of different texts and those sort of things. But we began to read some of these Wednesday audiences, but still didn't understand a lot about it, other than I realized, my goodness, I'm seeing correlations between what I'm reading in Gaudium et Spes, like different documents from Vatican II, and what John Paul II is saying. And I realized there must be a connection. He must have been an author behind some of these works because they're so similar. Well, at that time, someone had introduced to me, before I read The Theology of the Body, this book that absolutely blew my mind. It was called Love and Responsibility by Karol Wojtyła. And really, before I really even delved into the theology of the body much, I was really reading this text of of Love and Responsibility, which is like eating fudge. You read two sentences and then you have to say, that's rich. And then you go grab your thesaurus and your dictionary and try to understand what he's meaning. That helped me to understand really the development of love in a variety of different ways, from a metaphysical, from a social perspective, from a psychological perspective. So when I began to read the Theology of the Body, my mind just then began to explode. I think the first time I actually read, TOB, Human Love and in the Divine Plan, was when I met you in 97 or 98. And you said, dude, you've got to go deep. You got to start really, really bathing yourself into this. So I was reading that while at the same time going through my second, third, and fourth readings of Love and Responsibility and making connections like I had never made before. Sort of at Steubenville, I was kind of trained more as a Thomist than anything. And so this was like a whole new lens for interpreting reality, for seeing theology, for understanding the human person, which did not undermine a Thomist perspective at all. It actually, it magnified it. It made it more
John Paul
beautiful.
II is a Thomist, but he was building on what Thomas gave us to take us to another level, a deeper level even, of understanding of what the human person is. From you're mentioning this idea of personalism, that he's helping us understand from an interior perspective what the human person is. And so John Paul spends so much time reflecting on human experience. And I want to say to our viewers, if you are not familiar with John Paul II's Theology of the Body, check out the link in the description to this video where you can get 3 free sessions to our Theology of the Body Level 1 course that we offer here at the TOB Institute. You will not regret dipping your toe into these waters. It will rock your world and change your life, as Tom is talking about. So sorry to cut you off there, Tom. Continue.
No, again, we talk about, you didn't use the word phenomenological approach, but the human experience, when all of a sudden I started realizing that I don't have to jettison my human experience.
Right.
God has given me a human experience. He has given me a body to encounter him, to encounter love. And I can bring this to all of the theology that I know. And I'm endeavoring to express and teach and that sort of thing. It just gave me a fuller toolbox, number one, and it gave me a new expression to fully live my faith. So, yeah, that was sort of my encounter. As you know, then I left working for the Archdiocese of Denver and went to work at a parish, which actually was the Columbine parish, if you recall. It was the parish that was close to when we had the Columbine shooting.
I remember it well. We lived through that together.
We did, and I became the director of marriage and family out there because I really wanted to get into the trenches of doing work with families and marriages, and that's when you and I, from there, did a whole variety of projects together on marriage and family.
So connect the dots between that, your experience with the theology of the body, doing marriage and family ministry, and years later you feel this calling to devote your considerable gifts and ministry acumen to this project of helping people enter into and offer forgiveness and experiencing freedom through forgiveness. And before we went on the air, you were talking about the bodily connection with forgiveness. Press into that a little bit.
I can't wait to do that. So yes, I spent many years, Christopher, doing marriage retreats, marriage preparation. I think Rosemary and I have probably prepared about 4,000 couples for marriage. We think.
And you and Rosemary have been married for 30, how many years?
Yes, 30. Yeah, it'll be 35.
35 years.
January.
Wow.
Yeah, 35 years. Delightful work. And oftentimes when we teach people about the theology of marriage, they come back and say, well, that's really good. Here's our situation. Here's what we're struggling with. Here's what we're doing. And so really my training in theology really prepared me more for pastoral theology. Not that I went into it to looking at as a pastoral theologian, but typically when you do work, there's people saying, I'm sure you see this every single day. That's really good stuff, Christopher. Here's what's going on with me. Here's what's going on in my marriage. Here's what's going on. How do I get to there? And so given that, that's been my passion over the decades, is really walking with people, accompanying them in this Christian walk. So it's probably 6 years ago or so, there was a who could not speak at a conference at the last minute. So somebody had called me and said, hey, can you fly down and can you give 2 talks? It doesn't matter, whatever you want to give them on. And at that time, I just started delving more and more into mercy, into forgiveness as it applies to the theology of the body. And I thought, what the hey, let's go down there. So I went down to Texas and I gave these 2 talks on forgiveness. And in the talk, I shared a little bit about my brokenness and my difficulty learning how to forgive. But I walked people through what I see as some various steps, basic stages of forgiveness, and explain how people get stuck here, and here. But God wants us to be free from that. That I know Scripture everywhere tells us that we need to forgive. If we don't forgive, God won't forgive us.
Right.
And that can scare us all. So how do I do it? How do I do it? I go to confession regularly and I ask for forgiveness. But what if I can't forgive? When I had finished those 2 talks, I had probably 35, 40 people in line waiting to talk to me. Now, that's probably common for you, Christopher. That's not common for me. I'll give talks regularly, but I don't typically have people coming to wait and talk to me.
So clearly you struck a nerve. You're hitting something that is resonating in the hearts of your listeners, and it was a surprise to you how much it was resonating.
It was a shocker. I had priests saying, you need to continue this work. I had psychologists and counselors saying, you are onto something. I had wives, husbands daughters, they wanted to tell me where they're stuck. They wanted to tell me their story. And I'm like, oh my goodness, Lord, what is going on?
So what do you think, what was what were the particular angles you were taking that were new or fresh for people that was their reaction?
Well, a couple of things. I think also telling my story, that someone realized I could tell my story, and people realized, wow, I can tell my story to somebody, because people waited in line to tell me, number one. Number two, they were able to identify where they were stuck in the process. And like, oh, so now I know where I am. How do I get stuck? Or misconceptions. You can set boundaries for yourself, lady. Like, just because you've forgiven him doesn't mean you need to let him keep doing this. Number one. Yeah. Or or like, I always thought forgiveness meant just not holding him accountable anymore. Like, it's okay. No, it's not okay. Forgiveness does not mean you don't ask for justice in this situation.
Yeah.
Giving people clarification in the process was like aha moments, light bulbs going off for people. So that was that second one. Another one is I walked through physiologically what's happening when we forgive in the body. That not only when we forgive are we called to express it in our bodies, but if we're expressing it, we will experience forgiveness, not only spiritually, but in and through our bodies, in our minds, in our emotions, in the way we breathe. We'll see it. Maybe we won't have cancer. I'm not saying that unforgiveness leads to cancer, but you start looking at all the medical studies that have been done tying unforgiveness to various medical conditions. It's astounding.
Yeah, so I want to press into this a little bit.
I shared some of that.
Can I press into that just a little bit?
That was amazing.
I want to help our listeners to understand this body-soul connection that in the Western world in which we live, we don't really understand this, that there are spiritual realities, emotional realities, psychological realities, wounds, pains, unforgiveness that get stored in our bodies. I'll just tell a quick story here, Tom, and then I want you to riff on this connection and help our viewers to see this body-soul connection. Here's just a quick story. I had a ski accident in 2015 in which I severed my femur at the hip, and I'm tied together to this day by rods and screws. And I was in physical therapy for about 18 months after the accident. And then I had taken some time off from physical therapy. I thought I had done my duty and was back pretty much to, functioning level. And maybe 6 months later, after that, I was having some more physical issues. I went back to a different physical therapist, and she said, well, I'm going to start doing some, massaging of that area where the trauma was. And you may feel this well of emotion come up. You may feel a need to weep. Not because what I'm going to do is physically painful, but because you've stored trauma there in your body. And I'm like, nah, I don't think I'm going to have any problems here, but thanks anyway. And she started doing her, rubbing into these muscles on my leg. And sure enough, this well of traumatic emotion started coming up in my heart, and the tears just started welling up. And it wasn't because of any physical pain. It was because of some emotional reality that she had unleashed by massaging this place where this real physical trauma had happened. So, I already knew in theory this connection, but that was a lived experience for me of that body-soul connection. And this is exactly what you're getting at, is it not?
Christopher, absolutely. Before I kind of walk through maybe physiologically what's happening, I think we have to remember that we are body-spirit composites. We are embodied spirits. What happens in the spirit manifests itself in and through the body. What we experience in the body is affected in us spiritually. How amazingly beautiful is that, right? So goodness. We start thinking about, like the thesis statement. The thesis statement of what St. Pope John Paul's, of the Theology of the Body. The body and it alone is capable of making visible that which is invisible, right? It's capable of transmitting, and you know exactly the words,
Yeah.
into the visible world, that mystery hidden since time immemorial, and thus be a sign of it. What is he saying? That in our bodies we are proclaiming a profound mystery, which God is love. So if that's the case, if we are called to experience God's love in and through our bodies, which then will be made manifest in the Spirit, when we don't forgive or when we do forgive, we're going to see that, experience that, not only spiritually, Scripture tells us that repeatedly, but in our bodies, in our minds, in our emotions. It's going to be stored in various
Yep.
places of our body. And that's one of the reasons why people lined up, because they're saying, I've got this gut issue going on, right? I got this back pain. Do you think it might be related?
Wow.
Right?
Wow. Wow.
My immune system has shut down, but I've got this bitterness that's going on inside of me. And then when all of a sudden you start helping people to realize, you see, we're called in and through our bodies to express love, to express mercy. Mercy is just one of the fruits of God's love, is it not? What is mercy? Mercy is basically saying, I see you suffering and I want to relieve it in some way. So what does forgiveness say? Well, forgiveness says, it has to work from a place of mercy. I'd say complete forgiveness. If we get time, I want to talk about the difference, what I call maybe complete versus incomplete forgiveness, right?
Say that again. What forgiveness versus what forgiveness? Say that again.
I either say either perfect forgiveness versus imperfect, but I think what's better is maybe complete forgiveness versus incomplete forgiveness, because we might just get over something, right, and say, okay, I'm just going to let this go, which is what modern psychology might tell us, right? You just need to get over it. Let go of the grudge. Well, that's a good thing. That's a very, very good thing. But complete forgiveness really comes from a place of mercy, that not only do I want to be free, but I want you to be free.
Yes,
right?
yes.
I want to relieve your suffering. And that, when you start working from a place of, I want to relieve your suffering, well, guess what? That totally frees us up to experience in and through our bodies a freedom that is just beyond what we can know at that moment, because we're so bound up in the bitterness and the resentment.
Tom, can you sum up a little bit? You said one of the things that really impacted your audience when you gave these talks at this conference was your own story of working through forgiveness. Can you sum that up for our viewers? What are some realities in your own life where you've had to work through forgiveness, and what were the struggles and what were the fruits in your life of working through that?
Well, I share several stories throughout the course, and part of the course is people learning to tell their stories, right? I'm not saying they have to tell the big terrible story, but it's learning to share your own narrative. There is a type of therapy called narrative therapy, which I'm not a psychologist, but people use. And part of it is learning to tell your story, and in telling your story, you take possession of that story. You don't let it control you. You control the story, so to speak. So I do share a lot of stories, but one of them that I share closer to the beginning of the course is, and I'll just kind of give you the Reader's Digest version of it, is when I was 15 years old. I was out in Connecticut. I did Irish step dancing growing up, and I went to this big competition out there. Long story short, in my entire dance troupe were sleeping over at these people's house. I woke up in the middle of the night, and some man had slipped into my bed, and was attempting to violate me. And it was
Mercy.
I froze. You'd think you just jump out of bed and not know I just didn't know what to do. All of a sudden, my body went into this adrenaline stage, but I did not know what to do. So I talk about, I got out of that situation. The next day, I went out to dance. And in Irish dancing, you typically might have anywhere from 3 to 7 judges adjudicating your dance. And I got up to dance, and I couldn't believe it, but the man that had
mercy,
attempted to violate me was the main judge, staring at me. And he had this sort of little smirk on his face,
Mm.
as if like he had done nothing wrong. And I knew at that moment what it felt to be looked upon as an object for use.
Oh,
We talk about women feeling this. All of a sudden I felt, and there was nothing I could do. I had told some adults about this that morning, the next morning, and they got angry, but I looked like nothing was going to happen. So long story short, that's one of the stories I walk with people. Initially, I was told I need to forgive, and I thought I had forgiven, but there was a whole host of deep emotions that I had never dealt with. I mean, my friends were like, "Well, that dude's just messed up," and
yeah, yeah.
they told me to brush it off, which I did until several years later when I just had this rage of anger just exploding inside of me, and I did not know what this anger was until I met this wonderful Catholic psychologist. And that happened. I was actually in ministry at that time, Christopher, at St. Francis Cambrini.
Yeah, I remember this.
I was looking for to bring a couple of healing programs to the parish. It wasn't that I felt like I needed to have any kind of healing. I was looking to bring healing to the parish. And the pastor said, "Well, go check out this program." He sent me to a couple places in the United States, and I went and looked at different kind of healing programs. So I met this Catholic psychologist, and she says, "Well, if you want to learn about it, you got to go through it." And I said, "Well, I have nothing wrong with me. I'm practically perfect in every way." But she said, "Okay." Well, all of a sudden, somehow this story came up, and she kept pressing and poking at it, and this deep rage came up inside of me. Then came shame.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything wrong, and yet I felt this deep shame inside of me. So there was rage, there was shame, there was guilt. But I was guilty that I didn't maybe tell more people about it to protect them afterwards. Right. A whole host of issues. And I realized there was stress, there was anger that was going on inside of me, doubt, guilt. That probably was manifesting itself in a whole variety of ways, and I did not even realize it.
Is this?
So that's one of the stories.
Is this when I remember when you went to this retreat with this woman, and you came back and you told me the story of part of the therapy was, didn't you have some kind of bat or something where you were pounding a pillow just to get out of your body that stored up anger? Wasn't that part of it?
Christopher, that's exactly what it was. And I've never heard of anybody doing this kind of therapy before. And yet even when she asked me to do it, I just thought this is a bit wacky.
Yeah.
She asked me to hit an ottoman. And what was beautiful, we can just go into it, she did something very beautiful, which really ties into mercy. Because I had forgiven this man, and I couldn't have any anger toward him. At least I thought I couldn't have any righteous anger. Righteous anger is an impassioned desire to make things right. Mm-hmm. Unrighteous anger is an impassioned desire for revenge, to bring harm.
Yeah.
But there was a righteous anger in me that wanted to make things right. And I had falsely told myself, well, I've forgiven him, so I can't be angry about something. And I had never dealt with the anger. So this Catholic psychologist said, okay, we're going to take the person. Let's call this guy Steve, okay? Because we're going to take Steve, the person of Steve, and we're going to put him in Nazareth. Just envision him being in Nazareth, protected by Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Mm. The sin that he committed, that's like this sort of suit around him. Like, I want you to put that on the ottoman. I want you to look at the sin. Mm. The person is protected, Tom.
Oh, this is so important to make that distinction. Otherwise, it
is amazing.
It actually frees you up to get the stuff out. Otherwise, you think you're inflicting this damage on the person. But it's appropriate to get the rage out at the sin.
Exactly. So we set the person in a place of protection and mercy. And she goes, if you want to, you're going to help him. Your job is you want to help him, Tom. That's what mercy is. You want to help the person. And I'm like, absolutely. She goes, but you haven't dealt with the pain and the grief and the anger that's going on inside of you. I'm like, interesting. She goes, that we're going to set on this ottoman.
Mm.
And she said, if you have any anger, I just want you to just say what's in your heart and say it. And she goes, when you say it, I just want you to hit that ottoman with the bat. And I said, well, this is pretty strange. But okay. So I just started hitting the bat, like, and talking, and like it was nothing. After a while, something triggered inside of me. And I started hitting this ottoman and the sin. I started addressing the sin head on, and I wasn't going to allow it to have control over me anymore. I started pounding this ottoman, screaming at it. I didn't realize it, but it was about 30 minutes later, and my hands were bleeding. But because I had kept hitting this, I don't think everybody has to go through this kind of therapy per se, but she was onto something. She helped me to realize that you are experiencing this in and through your body. You need to get this out. You need to grieve it. You need to allow this anger to get out, so you can move on. And so that's what I did. That is the story. It's funny. I don't think I've shared that with very many people before, Christopher. But that's
wow, Tom,
exactly
thank you for your willingness to share that here. I think you're giving our viewers permission to recognize how deep this stuff goes, and that there is a way out. I think a lot of people think we just have to grin and bear it, and go on with life and put on a happy face, which really ends up being a mask hiding what's really going on under the surface. I believe just in your willingness to share this story vulnerably, you're giving people permission to say, okay, there's an avenue, there's a channel here. And this is exactly what you're providing in your 7-week program, this retreat that you offer. Tell us what people experience as you walk them through over a 7-week program. And then you have, if needed, up to a year follow-up with people. Am I right about that?
Yeah, you're right, Christopher. So really, the course is broken up into my 3 C's: content, contemplation, and community. So when we get together each week, I begin with sharing some content.
This is via Zoom, right? Do you meet on a Zoom call?
Yeah, this is via a video streaming, correct. And so it's either me, or I might be talking to a psychologist, I might be talking to a priest, where we'll talk about some aspect of forgiveness and resentment in the whole process. Then we have 30 minutes of break out into a small community. I say we're learning to share our stories and have a safe place where we can discuss this. And so there's that component. And then we have contemplation, where every session we're doing at minimum a 30 to 45 minute contemplation, because we're mind, body, spirit composites, and all of these things impact us. So those are the 3 components that I do in the course each week. But typically what happens is you start turning the screws, you start opening up the wound, so to speak. Typically week 3, 4, 5, 6, I will get a call, or I'll get an email, or the conversations in the small groups is that I'm not getting better, I'm getting worse. And in other words, we have stuffed things for so long in areas that we don't realize the nuances, the effect that it's having on us. And certainly when we start looking at something, it's like when we go through chemotherapy, right? The body, is really being broken down, all those cells, so that we can try to heal ourselves. That's kind of what happens many times as people start going into the course, because you're addressing things that were unchecked, that were not looked at for a while. So that's why after the actual official 7 weeks, then I will meet with the group, for whoever wants to, for up to another 4 to 5 months every other week. And I'll give shorter lectures, but then there's a broader, longer time for discussion. Then after that, I'll do typically 2, I call them initiatives or challenges. We'll take some aspect in our life and we'll work on it. And then we'll apply it to forgiveness and freedom. And by that time, it's no longer a freedom to forgive. It's, by the end of that year, it's freedom to love. Because many people have said, you really should call this the Freedom to Love course, because that's really what you're teaching people how to do, is how to love, how to show mercy. And I haven't changed it. because I think that might be a totally different course. But really, we are teaching people how to love. Throughout the course, every day, we give them homework. And there's spiritual homework, there's mental work where you have to really study, analyze your thoughts and how they impact you and what's happening in your mind and what thoughts is your cerebellum kicking. Let me just blow your mind for a second.
Yeah, please.
If we've gone into a chronic habit of bitterness, resentment, let's say every day, which our body interprets as stress, and what happens is amazing. But so every day, let's say, or you have this moment of stress related due to bitterness in your heart, or all of a sudden you have a memory that's put into your mind. After a while, like you've trained your body in receiving the cortisol kick every single day. So just like in the mornings when your body says, "Hey Tom, it's time to go get some caffeine." I think I need my cup of coffee.
Right.
2:00 hits. "Hey Tom, it's time to get bitter." Because right now, during this time of the day, we usually get a cortisol kick in our bodies. So it's almost like your cerebellum is telling your cortex, hey, it's time to get bitter.
Wow.
You've trained yourself. Our body is a system of chemicals, hormones that are released in our body, right? It's like our mind tells our body something, and hormones are released and chemicals are released in our body. Like, okay, I'm feeling forgiveness. I'm feeling anger now. Yeah. It sends a message back to the brain. Yeah, we know what anger feels like. We know what forgiveness. You keep doing that, you're training yourself in a certain emotion because your body receives these chemicals on a regular basis. Now it's your body telling your mind, hey, Tom, it's time to get bitter again because this is what we do every day at this time.
Wow. Can we do a little role play here, Tom?
Sure.
Can I walk you through something that I'm going through right now? And I'm going to make myself vulnerable here on YouTube Live. and I just want to see how you would walk me through this. Because what you're saying about this, like a certain time of day, something will kick in and say, now it's time to get bitter. Well, I have this happen to me every year, this time of year, when Christmas is coming. Like something in my system shuts down and gets angry, and it happens. It's probably happened for the last 15 or 20 years at Christmas time, and it's a bit of a mystery to me. I mean, I can point to certain things about all the boxes of stuff that are coming into our house and descending on our house, and I'm a person of order, and I like things to have their place. And that brings a certain level of peace to me, to have everything have a place. And just like I do the math in my head, like, okay, all these boxes are now coming into the house. And unless we have an exhaust where other things are going out of the house, we're going to have a more crowded house. So, I look at little things like that and I think, is that what's driving me crazy? But I think my reaction is disproportionate to that. Like that's a little trigger, but there's something deeper going on. So I get this annually and I'm going through it right now. How does your program or how does your understanding of what might be happening in me, what steps can you give me to take a deeper look at this?
Well, that may or may not be related to resentment and bitterness. And I always tell people, I am no psychologist.
No.
I am no therapist. That being said, I have many therapists who have taken the course and they want to take elements of this and put it into the course, right?
Right.
But I will say this. One of the elements that we have incorporated into the course now is prayer healing, which is a type of intense healing where we take you into the memory, into the emotion. And it may not happen in the course itself, but there are various prayer groups that have come to the course because they pray with people who are struggling with some element of resentment in their life. And so I will send people who are in the course to these people to go through a type of prayer healing. And this type of prayer healing is basically going back to the emotion. Okay, what's the emotion that's going on in you, Christopher?
Yeah.
Are there any memories associated with that? Right? Are there any memories? And once they go to that memory, I look at that memory, and say, okay, yeah, then they tie that emotion to it. And then asking Christ to come into this memory, into this emotion, and bring his light, bring his truth to it. So, and we've seen just tremendous healings with people who have gone through the forgiveness course. So that is not necessarily something we do in the course itself, but it is something we offer outside of the course, because we realize with all of this, the memory and the emotions are so tied together, and then we can't see clearly. We have the blinders on us, and we're asking basically, Jesus, bring your light to this memory. What is the lie I began to believe? So perhaps with you, it looks like there may be some lie that you have believed in your life at some level, right? That when you see those boxes coming in, stress is, it sounds like stress is kicking in,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So all of a sudden, adrenaline is kicking in the body,
Right,
cortisol is kicking in.
right.
Probably your heart rate begins to go up. You're getting a little agitated, and
Yeah,
you don't even know why. Well, then
yeah.
I would say we need to go back to what is the memory that's triggering that, right? Which is what we do in sometimes with forgiveness. If people don't know what they need to forgive, see this. I don't want to be overly generalizing, but I've seen it more with women than I have with men. Where men, they know, okay, I'm upset about this. This dude did this. Where women oftentimes might be more like a stew pot, where they have several things that their husband might have done over the years. They get put into the stew, and they stir it up, and they don't know exactly what it is. And I've got to help them identify what it is. I'd say that's one of the first stages of taking people through a process of learning how to forgive. Is I call it state the offense or state the grievance. They have to identify exactly what it is, because many of us don't even know
Right.
what we're upset about, what is hurting us. And so helping people to name it and acclaim it, even accuse. I don't say you have to accuse the person. I mean, go to them and say, I'm accusing you. In your own mind, you need to know what the offense is so that you know what you have to forgive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Tell us some stories that stand out for you from people who've been through this course and have experienced this kind of breakthrough in offering forgiveness, experiencing free, as the course is called, freedom through forgiveness. Give us some of those stories of people who've tasted that freedom.
Well, many, I won't say a high percentage, but many people go through the course, someone very close to them who has hurt them, mother, father, sisters, brothers, their children, and so they're struggling with this, and sometimes they don't feel like they can forgive that person, or they've forgiven them, but they haven't gotten over it. It's that impartial forgiveness, right? Or the partial forgiveness,
Partial forgiveness, yeah.
where they've just gotten over it, but they really haven't dealt with it, because they think they need to say, it's okay, I don't need to hold you accountable. And there's this deep resentment that's inside of them. So we have a man who was in the course, and he's a psychologist. And I asked him to do a litany of forgiveness, to do the prayer one night. Would you do the meditation? And he did a litany of mercy, forgiveness toward his dad. An amazing story. Basically, when he was growing up, his father left his mother, left the entire family for another woman. And he never saw his father again. Just never saw him. It was a deep wound for him through all of that. Years later, he heard that his father had actually remarried somebody else and had children with this other woman. And so this man went through a process of forgiving his father for leaving them. And so in this litany of prayers, he prayed this litany. First, he did a litany of mercy. My father did this. Lord, have mercy on him. My father did this. Lord, have mercy. And he went through this, and we're all listening to this. Very profound, as tears are running down his face.
Wow.
And then he walked through a litany of empathy. My father, this is what happened to him when he was a child. This is what happened to him here. This is what happened to him here. And he started having a real sense of empathy for his father, and he realized his father became a product of his own upbringing. And so he became what he had been exposed to those many years. So everybody's listening to this, and we're absolutely astounded. Well, then he tells us the rest of the story. His father had died. He had heard that his father had died, and his dad lived in Canada. So he went up to visit his new wife. I mean, he went to the funeral.
Wow.
And at the funeral, because he felt he was at a place of real recovery and restoration and freedom from all of this. And he went up and he introduced himself to his dad's second wife and his children, his step sisters and brothers. Their eyes light up, their jaws drop, because they never knew that he had another family.
Mercy, mercy, mercy.
Now he just felt like he was this forgotten, not only forgotten child, but completely and totally disowned.
Wait, just so I have this straight. So the father, when he remarried, never told the woman that he married that he had been married before and had other children? They didn't know. They did
Correct.
not know of the existence of his other children.
That is correct.
And he's
That
learning
is
this
correct.
at what age?
50?
Oh, my word.
Exactly. So then he goes through this litany of forgiveness for his father. And it was profound. Everybody in the class was just crying in that moment. I mean, God works wonders in amazing ways. Just by him walking through those litanies of empathy and mercy and forgiveness, there are 4 people in the class that had almost immediate graces of forgiveness.
Wow.
For the people in their life. Now, has it continued? I mean, they probably need to continue to pray on that. But if you talk about a grace that has given to those people because this man had forgiven like that, is profound. And I say that, they need to continue to work on that because I think sometimes we've received a grace to forgive. But, Satan keeps talking to us. And sometimes you don't even need Satan. Our own self, our own memories kick in, and old resentments can keep coming in. That's why we need to practice it. One of the elements of the course, Christopher, I meant to share this earlier, is there's a lot of practice, of virtue practice. Like each week, there's a practice of a different virtue. It could be self-denial. It could be generosity. It could be encouragement. Because we cannot give what we do not receive.
Right.
So the whole course is about breathing in and breathing out. You have to breathe in God's mercy. You have to learn. If you can't forgive, you've got to find out where you need to be forgiven, where
Yes.
you need to receive God's mercy. That's where complete forgiveness comes from. It's not just letting go of something. Learn to receive. Where in your life do you need to be forgiven? Where? And so they really have to do a soul searching, a mind searching. And then you have to start practicing each one of these things. You have to practice forgiveness in little ways every single day. You have to practice generosity. You have to practice letting little things go so that you can let the big things go. So it's not just coming and listening to Tom talk. There's a daily meditation that people are encouraged to do. There's daily virtue practice. There's daily mental practice that they're called to do throughout those 7 weeks. And then we're just practicing that throughout the year so that by the end of the year, please God, we have a freedom to love. Forgiveness, yeah, we've done that. We've been merciful. Now we've hopefully been freed to actually learn to love in a whole new way. So
I was struck by this litany of empathy that you were sharing, where one of the stages here is to recognize the pain that the person who caused you the pain, to recognize the pain that person was in. Am I getting that right? This litany of empathy?
absolutely. Whether we like it or not, when we've been harmed, we're tethered to that person in some way.
Yeah.
We've had or that group of people, and complete forgiveness stems from willing the good of the other, wanting the good of and what is it? You want them to be freed. You want them to be restored in some way. And so really that empathy comes from understanding what they're going through.
Yeah. I'll tell you a
they might have
story
done this.
there that's very fresh for me. This just happened like 2 weeks ago. But it was a major step for me in working through some of my own pain from my early childhood. I was on an early flight. This was 2 weeks ago. The sun had not yet come up. I had my nice little window seat, and I had my prayer journal, and I was just following up on something my spiritual director, beautiful priest I've been seeing for 18 years, he just gave me this little prayer assignment to look at a situation I was with in my marriage where I was lacking empathy for Wendy. And I was kind of stuck on my own pain. And when you're stuck on your own pain, it's so difficult to see what the other person is going through. So I was just on this airplane. It was early in the morning. Sun hadn't come up. And it's like, okay, Lord, show me why was I so unable to have empathy for my wife? Why was I so stuck on myself? And this memory, like almost a muscle memory, not so much a memory that I actually have because I was too young to have memories, but I have this image of me like I'm 3 months old and I'm screaming for my mom and she's not coming. And this is something that an image I've had many times in my prayer life, working through some stuff, some pain in my early childhood. This image of a feeling of abandonment. And I'm taken back to this memory, and for the first time, I started wondering, what was my mom going through at this time? What pains or what struggles or what sufferings was she experiencing? She was 25 years old when I was a newborn. What stresses was she under? And I started having this powerful empathy for my mother. And I realized like this, it's an obvious statement, but it's so obvious you don't really press into it much, or you kind of take it for granted. Like the relationship that each of us has with our mother is our very first human relationship. And of course, that's going to color every other human relationship you ever have because it's your fundamental human and first human relationship. And it's as if in a flash, when I started having empathy for my mother and what she was going through when I was a newborn baby, and I know some of the history there was some tough, painful stuff my mom was going through that certainly impacted her relationship with me. But having that empathy for her, it's like all of my other relationships in my whole life started getting seen in a new light. Like it's like the sun was rising on my life, and I was seeing things in new colors. And I'm sitting there on the airplane, and just tears are running down my face, and I'm realizing how much mercy God has for me, and I was receiving it, and it was flowing out of me towards my mother, and from
Amen.
my mother, every other human relationship that I've ever had. I started having more mercy and compassion on this person. I started having empathy on this person and that person and that person. And it's like every relationship I've ever had, it was like the sun was rising and the light was shining. And all of a sudden, I opened my eyes, and the universe is telling the same story that I'm experiencing spiritually, because the sun out my airplane window was coming up on the horizon and the beams were shining in through the window onto my heart. It was a very, very powerful, it was one of those moments where you know God is doing something and you're saying yes to it, and furniture in your heart is getting rearranged and things are being set right, and you're seeing the world as it really is. And I just realized I wanted to say to everybody on the airplane, I wanted to say to the person next to me, I wanted to say to the flight attendant who was bringing me a glass of water, I wanted to say, hey, everything's going to be okay. Whatever you've suffered, whatever you've struggled, there is a God who loves you and has a plan to make it all right. It's really real. The truth of mercy, the truth of forgiveness, the truth of empathy was alive, and I was living it. And it wasn't something I was not pulling myself up by my bootstraps and trying really hard to have empathy on my mom. It was a grace that I was opening to and receiving, and in receiving it, it was flowing out of me. And I imagine this is something of what you guide people into in this retreat.
Christopher, absolutely. That was the commercial, because absolutely, partial forgiveness is us pulling ourselves up.
Yeah.
We're letting go. Not going to hold, someone endlessly responsible for my own happiness. We're not going to look in the past anymore, right? We're not going to allow those negative emotions to affect me. Great, but we're doing it.
Yeah, yeah.
Complete forgiveness is breathing in.
Yeah, yeah.
And people don't get this. It's like, what does this have to do with forgiveness? Breathing in, just as you did, you breathe in God's love, his mercy. By being empathetic towards your mother, you're breathing in a new understanding. How awesome, how beautiful this is. And then your reservoir is full.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it isn't just like, okay, I'm just trying to give what I can. You're not just some sort of conduit pipe. Now you are a reservoir of God's love that is just pouring out. I mean, that is exactly what we try to teach the people. And that's what I'm saying. The first few weeks, it takes a while. Sure, we can give them glimpses of it. And sure, people can experience, incredible freedom. But it is only by them receiving God's mercy and love in them that then they are really given the freedom to love, the freedom to forgive. That's why, I may end up changing the course's name to A Freedom to Love, because that's what's happening.
And that's what I experienced, Tom. I experienced a new freedom to love my mother, and the letting go at a deeper level. Like, there was a resentment I had because you didn't meet my needs, and I was it came so readily and simply and easily to say, it's okay that you didn't meet my needs. You had a lot of needs of your own. You were going through a lot of pain yourself. And I love you there. And I believe God is going to provide both for your needs and for my needs super abundantly. And it's like I was able just to, like, pressure's off, Mom. I don't need you. I don't need you to be something for me that I've demanded that you be for me. It was like a real release of that. And I did just recently, I got together with my mom to share some of this with her. And it was a beautiful, I felt a tender love for my mother that I knew was the Lord. It was Jesus in me loving my mom. It was real. This stuff is real. The whole, like, Christ in me, the hope of glory, all that stuff, it's real. And I'm going to loop back to how we started this whole conversation about John Paul II's emphasis on experience. Like, the gospel is meant to become a lived experience. Love one another as I have loved you is meant to be a lived experience. But we have these blocks in us that prevent us from even receiving that love to be then able to give it. And as those walls come down, and that's the experience I had on the airplane a couple weeks ago, just a grace, a sheer grace to say yes, to recognize where, like, a bitterness in my heart because you weren't able to meet my needs was keeping me from having empathy for my mom, was able to give that to the Lord. And I felt the Lord's empathy for me in my pain. I felt the Lord saying to me, in that place where my mom wasn't able to meet my needs, doesn't mean I don't have real needs. I do. It doesn't mean she wasn't, that it didn't cause me pain that she wasn't able to meet them. It did. But I heard Jesus also speaking so profoundly to me, behold your mother, like Mary. I am providing super abundantly for you. I am providing for you my own mother to meet those needs that your earthly mother wasn't able to provide. And in that place of trust that the needs are going to be met in a super abundant way. Okay, Mom, you're free. I don't need, I can let go. It's okay. Mm-hmm. It's so okay. It is so okay that you were not the perfect mom. It is so okay because Jesus has given me a perfect mom. And we do, we all need perfect love. We are made for perfect love. And nobody gets it here in our normal human relationships because we're all fallen. But Jesus and Mary know how to give us perfect love. And it's real. And we can experience it. That's what I want to say.
You were able to have empathy for your mother, which was great, which brought about your healing. What I see happen to people, the second stage of forgiveness is really learning to trust and to turn toward this mercy, to turn toward it, which is what you did, having empathy, which is fundamental to learning a true freedom for forgiveness. The problem is so many of us, we're in our hurt, but like, you don't understand. Like, you don't understand what he did to me. It hurts. And it's almost like this. It's like we're in a prison cell and we're chained up against the wall. Our hands are chained up right like this. Jesus comes and blows open the door. You may have heard of this analogy before. He blows open the door and he's at the door and says, come. And he invited you to look and be empathetic towards your mother, right? Like there's this window to look. Or he's saying, be free. It is, I have broken the chains. And we see it, we want it. All of a sudden we go like this. And all of a sudden we realize, I'm still stuck. And Jesus is saying, come. And we're like, the problem is now he's broken the chains. Who is holding on to the chains?
We are.
We're the ones holding on to the chains. Christ has broken the chains, has set us free. He's blown open the door and he's saying, you gotta let go. And you're like, but you don't understand. Like, you don't understand, Lord, like what's happened to me. And he's saying, I do understand.
Yeah.
I do.
I've lived it with you.
I've lived it. But there's a new path. Let go. Trust me. Let go of the chains. And there's a new path to freedom. And that's what you're telling us that you experienced. Once you moved beyond, this pain, this hurt, that people weren't there for me. And he enabled you to, through trust, to see it through a new lens. And all of a sudden you're like, I'm so sorry. You're living in Christ's mercy in that moment. You're living in his freedom, which then, that's so cool. Then you're able to have everybody else experience this. You want to share it with everybody.
Yeah, that's want people to know the freedom that you've come to know, because it's real. It's really real. And there are layers and layers. As you said earlier, the Lord can work a profound miracle, and we can have a kind of instantaneous experience of that. But generally speaking, if we have a wound in our hand, the Lord can heal it right away. He has the power to do that. But usually he takes the natural course and allows your body to go through the different stages of the healing. And there's a similar reality with our emotional and spiritual wounds, psychological wounds. The Lord can do a miracle of a healing, but usually we have to go through a natural process. And this Freedom to Forgiveness course helps people, facilitates, accompanies people through that process. How can people learn more, Tom? I know we have a link in our description to this video where they can learn more, but if they were to want to learn more, to sign up maybe, when do these courses start? How does it all work? Can you say more about the practical reality of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll be kicking off the next course on January 21st of 2023 with the Saturday retreat, a Saturday morning retreat. And then it'll go for 6 Thursdays after that, and then end with another retreat at the end. And I call it a course, but it is a retreat more than anything. There's a lot of content, a lot of stuff we're learning, but there's a lot of spiritual work you got to do. There's a lot of just virtue practice, as beautiful as it is. So they can email me, and this actually came to me as I was doing a presentation at the Theology of the Body conference for you guys during COVID. It hit me as I was recording my talk. I need to do a course on this. And this is what happened. It hit me, and I said, I came up with an email that on the spot, and I said, if you want to know more, if you'd be interested in being in a course with me that I'm thinking of doing, email me at forgivenessisfreedomforyou@gmail.com.
And you didn't even have the address yet?
I didn't have it. I figured it's probably long enough, but I made it up in the moment. Forgivenessisfreedomforyou at gmail.com. So,
and is that still a valid email?
It is.
Okay, Thomas, do we have that in the? Okay, we have that in this description too. We have that email there. So they can be directly in touch with you about it.
Right, and they could call me. I think that's going to be the number there, 678-910-1526. This next course, interestingly enough, I'm not going to do it on my website. I'm going to do it with two psychologists who have a site. It's called www.heartsandsouls.com. Heartsandsouls.com. They asked me if I would do the course for all of their people. Over who come to this site, and so that's where all the videos are going to be recorded, and we'll put them there so people can go access them. That's where I'm going to upload all of the documents, the workbook, the journal, the prayer journal, everything that accompanies the course. But yeah, so they could go there and find out about it, or forgivenessisfreedomforyou at gmail.com.
Tom, I'm reminded, and I'd like to close with this. You certain stories get logged away in your heart, in your mind, and they meant something to you, and you draw on them for the rest of your life. And there is a story you told me over 20 years ago that has been one of those stories for me, where I come back to it over and over. Even as I remember it now, like I get a little lump in my throat. It has been so meaningful to me. It's a story of the mercy that your sister Ellen showed you. Do you know the story I'm talking about? I'm putting you on the spot.
I got a lump in my throat. Yeah. I think I know which one you're talking about.
That you had been so cruel to her when you were little that you caused her you would slam her on the ground or something, and you caused her some permanent pain in her tailbone or something.
Yeah, I got to tell you the whole story. My sister, and I'm not saying this just because she is a holy, holy woman, Ellen Moran, and she's my dearest spiritual soul to me, because she brought about my conversion, right? When she converted, it was the person who I thought hated me. When she converted to Christianity, came back to her Catholic faith, I immediately came back because of her, because she was the one I thought there was no redemption for, in a sense. Growing up, normal kids, but she was the oldest, I was the youngest, and we fought. She would be upset at me because I was the mama's boy and these sort of things, and we'd fight. And I remember she would dig her nails into my hands. I still have little scars on my hands from the nail marks that she used to dig. She used to dig into my hands, and it would just be this anger. I didn't understand why this person didn't love me, who didn't like me. And I was much smaller. I was the youngest. And I would actually run behind her when she would, inflict this kind of pain on me. And I would, because I was very fast, and I'd run behind her, grab her shoulder blades, push them in like this, and I would ram my knee as hard as I could into her tailbone. I would just ram it there. And God bless my sister, she would fall to the ground in pain. Right? She would just fall to the ground in pain. And I was probably 10, 8, these different years, but it was my motive. I would go around and I would hit her a hard punch. And I remember inside I would be dying. I'd be like, I'm so sorry, Ellen. I'm so sorry. And the only words that would come out of this little boy's mouth were, you're okay. You deserved it. Right? Because we didn't have the ability to communicate what was really going on with us. And that's what I would say, and I would be broken inside when I would see her on the ground, just, writhing in pain. Many, many years later, after our conversions and this sort of thing, she lived for many years in Ireland with her family. And it was one Christmas season, we were there in Ireland, and in Ireland you all gather every night around the fireplace and you all talk and sing. She was sitting on the ground, and I think this is the story you were telling, that she was sitting on the ground. And all of a sudden she got ready to stand up really quick, and all of a sudden she grabbed her back. And I knew what it was. It was this pain that she carries with her for the rest of her life because of me jamming my knee into her tailbone that many times when I was a child. And she saw me staring at her, and she looked at me, and she just winked at me, just gave this gentle wink, like,
I love you, brother. And I don't know how to explain this, Christopher, but the pain that she carries today is the intimacy that we have for one another, because it's rooted in mercy, it's rooted in love for one another, it's rooted in forgiveness for one another. And I can't explain that, but that the pain that she carried, and by her showing me mercy in that moment, I know I am forgiven, and it's bonded us eternally.
I have drawn on that story, Tom, so many times, and I know your sister Ellen too, and I am so grateful to her openness to God's mercy for you, because that there are the way I draw on that story in my own life and my own experience. It's just when I need to know that the whole reality of mercy is real, I think of that story, because it's such a beautiful story of someone offering her pain and returning love for the pain. That's otherwise we just, life just becomes one wounded person hurting other people. We become wounded wounders, right? I'm wounded, and I'm going to pass on my pain to somebody else. Somebody in that cycle has to say, I'm going to absorb the pain and I'm going to show love. That's what Christ did on the cross. And when he says, love one another as I have loved you, he's inviting us into the miracle of that kind of mercy and forgiveness. And it's real. And it's true liberation. It's not just some theory. It's not just some scripture verses about forgiveness that we're supposed to memorize and grit our teeth and try to implement. It's a grace that is given. It is a gift that we can open to. And it is a gift having open to, and it's not like it's a once and done thing. We need to continually open ourselves and go deeper and deeper. And the deeper we go, the deeper we can share that same mercy with others. I'm so grateful to your sister for that. And I'm so grateful for your friendship with me over the years, Tom. I'm grateful for this conversation. And I want to say directly to our viewers, this freedom through forgiveness is real. I cannot think of a better person to invite our audience to entrust yourself to if you're in need of someone accompanying you on a journey of letting go of resentment, letting go of bitterness, letting go of anger, letting go of pain, and walking into this freedom through forgiveness. I can't think of a better person to entrust you to than my brother, Tom McCabe. And I mean that sincerely, Tom. You are one of those men in my life I just think of as just you've been a light in my life and an inspiration in my life because of your faithful yes to Jesus through good times, through bad times. We all have our struggles and trials, and I know some of yours, and your fidelity, your continued yes to Christ in the midst of all that has been a great inspiration in my life. So grateful to you, brother. Thanks for being with us today.
Happy to be here.
Peace, Tom. Peace, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others, and do check out all the links in our description. Especially check out those 3 free sessions that you can get on our Theology of the Body Head and Heart Immersion course. Till next time, God bless.